Yep.
So welcome everyone to the special triage call, which should focus on the CRD version 1 issue. In the chat, there's a link to the GitHub search URL with all the issues, and I guess we can start from the top. So the first issue is about the layout of the Kafka custom resource in the V1 API. So I had this idea that with the zookeeper part being gone, we can move basically everything what's left in the spec.kafka section directly into the spec section, because it kind of a bit better corresponds to what the resource is doing and how it configures the things. And it's also named Kafka, so why should we have the Kafka configuring Kafka spec Kafka? But the discussion seems to suggest that that's not really what other people prefer. So I guess we should reject it and stick with the structure we have today.
Yeah, my feeling was, at least for some of the properties like version and things like that, it makes sense having it under Kafka because we configure other things like cruise control that I don't know if cruise control actually has a version, but to a brand new user, they might be confused about what the version refers to. But I do think we could review what's under the Kafka section and decide if there are any things that we would want to uplift directly under spec.
To be honest, for me, the version is the only field I would think would make sense to move on its own separately.
That's one of the ones that I feel makes sense having it under Kafka, so it's clear it's the Kafka version, not some other version of the entity operators or cruise control or.
Yeah, but I mean, it's Kafka version because it's in the Kafka resource, right?
I know it's in the
Uh,
Kafka resource.
Anyway, these are the fields which can share the link as well, because it's not easy to share everything on a single screen. But these are the fields which are in the Kafka spec. And to be honest, I don't think any of them are really somehow applying to more than the Kafka part itself. So if we think it should stay, that part should stay in spec.kafka and not be directly in spec, then I have trouble imagining any of these moving to spec on its own.
The only one I vaguely wondered about was listeners, because I guess cluster CA and client CA is configured at a higher level. But given all the other ones that are under there, I feel like maybe we just leave it as is, and then it's just less confusing for experienced users. To me, it doesn't feel that strange to have a Kafka section underneath, because we have the other ones for like cruise control and things like that. So it kind of groups things a bit better.
Yeah, that was mostly my reasoning. What I see in the Kafka custom resource is a kind of Strimzi Kafka cluster, which is not just Kafka, but is Kafka plus cruise control plus exporter and so on.
Yeah,
So,
but the resource is not called Strimzi Kafka cluster, it's Kafka, right?
Yeah, I know, but maybe we made a mistake calling it just Kafka. So yeah, on my side, grouping was more understandable, just to be sure that these things are about the Kafka, Apache Kafka cluster.
Okay, so we want to reject this.
Yeah.
Okay, not planned. Great. At least we didn't spend too much time on it. So the next one is around the replicas field. So the replicas field is currently required in the Kafka no-pool resource, but it's optional everywhere else. And for whatever reason, it has also different defaults. So the proposal here is to make this mandatory for Bridge, Connect, and Mirror Maker 2 as a required option. However, it is also in the Kafka topic resource where kind of the replicas field essentially is used as a replication factor configuration. And there it doesn't seem to make much sense as that's basically inherited from the Kafka cluster defaults configuration when it is not set. And that seems like it's a good design because it allows the Kafka topics to be, for example, portable between a development cluster with a single replica and production cluster with 3 replicas and just inherit the replication factor from there. So it sounded in the comments like this has some support.
Yep. I did have a question there, which is how come it's called replicas in the Kafka topic and not replication factor or something?
I guess we like that it's using the same name as the standard Kubernetes replicas field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a way, it is similar, but it's not completely the same.
Yeah.
I mean, if you would want, we can consider renaming it in the V1.
Yeah, I wonder if it might be worth considering, but that would be a separate issue. So I'm happy for us to accept this issue. I don't know what other people think about a separate suggestion of changing the Kafka topic replicas field to be more closely aligned to the Kafka config name rather than the Kubernetes.
Seems like unnecessary effort to me, to be honest.
So yeah, I'm fine with changing. Yeah, it's not a big deal, but I'm fine with changing that if we want.
So if you would want to change it, it would mean that we need to add the new field right now, basically, deprecate the replicas field, update everything in the topic operator to use both fields, and then have only the new field in the V1 resources.
Yeah. So I will be for opening an issue, as Kate said, and maybe having even maybe Fede commenting on it because he's one of the people working mostly on the topic operator.
I'm not sure we care about who works on the topic operator. It's a question
Yeah,
of the API.
just for having more feedback.
I mean, I'm absolutely sure that this is doable if we decide we want to do it.
Why don't we carry on for now and I'll open an issue and then we might even get to it at the end of this meeting.
Yeah, I can open the issue right now for it, right, during the call, but we should not delay the decision too much.
Well, no, I was suggesting we carry on the discussions and I'll open it in the background.
Okay.
And then, yeah, we can hopefully get to it at the end of this meeting.
So the next issue is around the task max field in the Kafka connector and Kafka Mirror Maker 2. So in the Kafka connector, it's just once. In the Kafka Mirror Maker 2, it's for each of the Mirror Maker connectors. So my thought behind opening this was that this is essentially the same as the replicas field in Kafka Connect or Mirror Maker 2 or Bridge. And the main difference really is that it's not Strimzi who decides on the default, but it's Kafka. But if I remember correctly, it doesn't work like the replication factor in the topics. it's not something where you can have a Kafka cluster in production with a default set to 10 tasks and in development to 1. It basically always defaults to 1. So the thought I had was that it's exactly the same as replicas, and having it required would improve the kind of visibility of this and help users to consider it. However, it seems that a lot of people are against it, so should we reject it?
Yeah, my feeling was just from a kind of ease of use of people looking at their connector configuration and then their Kafka connector configuration. I feel like the max tasks configuration can be confusing for people who don't understand it. So if you're coming from a state where you haven't set it to then having to set it, you could be setting it to something wrong. So I don't feel like we necessarily need to force people to consider it if they haven't had to think about it before, if they're happy with just the default.
Can't you two present exactly the same thing as advantage, that all the people who didn't know there was this setting and were by mistake using single task for their connectors, they will now be aware of this?
Yeah.
No, I guess.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
no, I said yeah. I said yeah. I don't know. I think the thing is with it is it's so you could have a configuration where you've set it to 10, but if the connector doesn't support more than 1, then it might just completely ignore and always set it to 1 anyway under the covers. That's to me where it feels like it's different to replicas. Like if you set replicas of 1, you're going to get replicas of 1. I know it's called max, so it kind of implies, but if you set max tasks to 10 on some connectors, it will never, it completely ignores that configuration option. So it feels kind of counterintuitive to set it for connectors that you know are ignoring it completely. So that's why I was kind of, leaning towards just letting Kafka do the default.
Okay, so I guess we should reject it. Anyone else? Any comments? Good. So the next one, which I opened, is about the slightly confusing way the template fields in the Kafka spec.kafka.template and in the Kafka node pool resources interact with each other. And turns out it's confusing even for the people who thought they understand how it works, right, Paolo? So like this is something I don't really have a strong opinion on, because I think there is a logic in how it works, and there are situations where both of them are useful, but there are some scenarios when it's confusing. So that's why I wanted to kind of raise it, mainly because, yeah, if we want to change something, then now might be the only opportunity we get until whatever 2030. So that's why I open it and we can discuss it.
I'm just reading right now your answer. Yeah, go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, I hadn't seen your response, so I was just reading that.
Yeah, so like I think the best thing to look into is if you look into a cluster configured like this. So what is the expectation? Will the pods created for the Kafka node brokers have the annotation, have the label, my label set or not?
Yeah, so that's what I was sort of getting to, which is that I could imagine a user specifying the situation that you specified there. I can imagine them expecting to have both the labels are assigned to everything and then also the Kafka container to have that environment variable. If you're setting the exact same field, then it's in your head, it makes sense like, okay, it overrides it, but it is unclear, I think, what happens when you, and there are I was having a look at the template section, there are actually quite a lot of different things you can override. So it would be very easy for you to set things, like here is an example with the label and the env, where they kind of feel unrelated in a way. Like one of them's to do with the environment variable on the container and some one's to do with so like they are related, but they're kind of, and then
they are unrelated, right? The hidden logic behind it is that basically in the Kafka node pool, you configure the template without any of the other sections, without the pod sections, which is, it's actually technically not the same. You can technically do that. You add kind of the pod template as an empty JSON object. But the way it was designed, actually this was approved in the Kafka node pool proposals. That was quite explicitly mentioned there. So it was approved as a part of that. But basically, the way you have the template field in a node pool and you didn't set there any pod template, you are in a way telling the operator that you are resetting the pod template to 0. So that's kind of the angle from which this seems kind of logical.
Yeah.
But if you don't know about this hidden meaning, then yeah, it might be confusing. And actually, like, I think we have several options how to deal with it, right? Like we can say that this is fine despite it being a little bit confusing, and we want to stick with it. We can decide that we kind of deprecate and remove the conflicting template fields from the Kafka spec template, where, for example, if you would want to specify the Kafka container or the template or the pod template, you would be able to do that only in the Kafka node pool. But in theory, we can also, well, it's always slightly breaking change. We can also decide to kind of go through with the breaking change in the code only. And we can, for example, decide that if you want to reset the pod template from the Kafka node pool template here, then you literally have to do like pod and empty JSON object to kind of set the pod template, but without any values, and that way override it. So it would be breaking change. But technically, I think it would be just about slightly different structure of the code, how we kind of pick up the right template. But technically, it would be something we can do. So like we can in theory decide to even do this change and just announce it to the users and not really do anything with regards to the API.
So yeah, I'm not for the first one about removing template from Kafka, because as you say, then I have to use the template in the Kafka node pool. And if I have more Kafka node pool, I have to put the template for each of them, right? Instead of having just one in Kafka. So it's useful. And I like, yeah, your third option about it's a breaking change, I know, about explicitly using a pod empty JSON to reset.
Anyone else?
I was just looking to see what documentation we have. I think so I'm definitely agreed on, I don't think we should get rid of the high level one, because I think particularly for setting things like labels, it's highly likely that users will want to set like a common label that's across everything, and so being able to set that at the Kafka level I think is useful. I'm torn between whether we change the way it works or whether we just more clearly, or I don't know if it is, this is what I was just checking to see if it is, but make sure it's very clear in the documentation that if you make use of the template section, like this is how it works, you have
I
to
think we did document it somewhere.
Yeah, I was just looking to see.
Don't ask me for a link.
No. Yeah,
So-
here we go. It says properties from Kafka and Kafka no-pull schemas are not combined to clarify if the spec template includes only labels and then the Kafka template includes annotations and labels. The template files for the Kafka configuration are ignored. So it is clearly, I mean, we state it in the document.
Yeah, but just because it's documented doesn't mean people don't run into the confusion, right? I mean,
Yes, right.
Well, and it's
we had people struggling with this. We also have some warnings issued by the operator in these situations to warn them about it. So
yeah. I think I'd be open to us changing it to merge the configuration if you specify them in two places.
So let's should we kind of decouple this from the V1 if we don't want to remove anything in the V1 API and set it as a non-V1 related issue which needs a proposal?
Yeah, I guess it's a breaking change, but it doesn't have to be done as part of V1, does it?
Yeah.
If we're not changing any of the fields.
Okay. So let's see. It's not CRD V1, it's not triage, it needs proposal. Let's maybe rename it. Okay, makes sense. I guess it does. Okay, the next issue is that's really just the general overall issue covering everything. I guess we want to have the V1 API. Maybe I should have started with that. I'm actually working on the proposal, so I don't think there's much discussed right now. We should just remove the needs triage label.
Yep.
Okay. So the next one is consider places missing the validation. Now, Paolo and Maros commented there that they are all up for using cell expressions for these validations. But I think the more interesting question, which I was hoping to get, is what validations should be added?
Oh, like a specific list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, for example, some parts where we are using the type structures, which have very bad validation because, yeah, to be honest, we kind of screwed up the CRD for the sake of some amazing Java capabilities. But I don't think we really can generate these automatically in any way. So I think it would be good if people can kind of think about the places they think the validation might be missing. And there are also, I think, you can't validate everything with the cell rules because I think there are some tests in Kubernetes whether the cell rules are too complex and whether they will be accepted, because otherwise they might kind of, the cell rule validations might kill the Kubernetes API server or controller manager or whichever component executes on them. So yeah, there might be that limitation as well. So like the idea behind this issue was a bit more to collect ideas where such validations might be most useful.
Yeah, so my assumption from the issue was that when we would mark the issue done is when we have a list and then we'd have issues from that list. But it sounds like everyone's up for us doing the work of working out where we're missing validation. So maybe we just need to mark this as triage but assign it to multiple people, or have a deadline or something?
So I think we can mark it as triaged, but yeah, I think the point is really to kind of try to collect under the issue the ideas of what should be fixed and whether we fix those in a separate issues or as a part of this one. I think that doesn't matter. We can decide it later.
Do you think it's worth doing a sort of divide and conquer of different people going and having a look at the different CRs so that we're doing this in the most efficient way? Or
I would more hope that people would share the pains they saw, or that was kind of the idea behind it. Not that kind of somehow everyone goes through some chunk of the code, but kind of people share what they saw in the past. Maybe nobody saw anything in the past.
Well, do we put a call out on the Strimzi Slack channel to say we're looking at this? Like, can people share it? What are your like? There's an issue here. If you've had problems with configurations where you wish there was validation or better validation, please add them here.
We can do that.
I'm going to ask the most stupid question of this call. I don't get what we are asking for. Sorry, guys.
So as a user, if you've is there a particular part of the CR where whenever you're deploying, or you've commonly seen when people are getting started with Strimzi or deploying things with Strimzi, that they have deployed something and didn't realize it wasn't invalid until they'd stood it all up, and they just wish that Kubernetes had told them the second they pressed enter? And if so, that would give us a good indication of which fields we should be adding that kind of validation to.
So it means that if no one is going to reply or provide their pains, we are going to take what we have today, the validation within the operator and not using cell expressions.
Well, I mean, if any of the maintainers have specific fields that they feel would be worth validating on, then we can add the validation for them. But I guess Jakob was saying that this why he created the issue is because he wanted people to share which specific fields they think we should add the validation to.
Well, so in general, my thinking is that having a validation at CRD level by using Kubernetes and not looking at the operator logs or things like that is better than waiting for the operator. So at the beginning, we didn't have the cell expressions, right? So we had to go this way. Now we can use the cell expressions. Why not using them?
So what are the places where you think we would have used the cell expressions if we had them originally?
In the example that you are making here for the one about what are the several types on the storage or out, right? Whenever we have these kind of subtypes where they have fields that make sense in some subtype but don't make sense in others, and we are validating in the operator today, I see them as an example of using the cell expression if we can put a validation on the kube side.
And
so the
what
subtypes.
What other places there are?
So off the top of my mind for now, storage and authentication.
No, I mean, it's easy to find the places where we use the typed fields, but what's beside the typed fields? That's the call, right? Like I mentioned the typed fields here.
Mm-hmm.
So what other places are there?
What other places? What do you mean by that? Sorry, Jakub.
What other places there are where some validation is missing? Like we discussed a bunch of them already today, right? The replicas field not being required, that's in a way missing validation. Somewhere here in the bottom, we have that the spec section is not required. That's a missing validation, right? Here we will get to it. There's the issue around the topic names in Connect and Mirror Maker 2. That's not exactly a missing validation, but it's a bit related to it as well, right? So what are the other places
Yeah,
where
I
we
will
might be
go.
missing? That's kind of the call.
Okay. So I have to go and take a look because I don't have any specific answer right now.
Right. So that's what we are kind of what we're discussing with Kay, that this issue is kind of a call for people to share these places.
Okay.
You've got things instead of think.
Yeah, you know, English is a weird language. So like this,
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
should we keep it as a needs triage so that we get back to it, I don't know, in 2.5 weeks or 1.5 weeks on the next triage call to see if we got something and decide how to continue with it?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I can add it to the community call as well. And we could ask people there.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing was about deprecating the OAuth authentication and key cloak authorization APIs. So my take is that these APIs got slightly out of hand and have a huge number of different options, which actually talking about the bad validation, they don't really have much validation in the CRD either. The users just set some of them and either the operator makes something out of it or not. And I was wondering if it would make sense to kind of deprecate these and have the users migrate to the custom authorization and custom authentication, which will basically give them more freedom to configure things exactly as they want. So it will still, whatever was supported before will still remain supported later. It's just that the form will be different. I think it will also kind of slightly simplify the code of the operator because we will have less specific authentications to handle. But I think it will be also a way to simplify the tests because we can kind of better separate the tests and kind of do the testing of the OAuth libraries in the OAuth repository, where Mark already has quite a lot of tests with different authorization servers. And we can kind of have a lot less duplicate testing in the operator system tests, where today we basically need to test all of these things as well because of the API and how that works and so on. So that was the idea. I expect that the main issue which will be there is dealing with secrets. So right now there's at least a way how to provide some TLS certificates through the OAuth authentication and keycloak authorization. And like there's, I think, some OAuth secret or something like that as well in some cases. So we have the additional volumes, which allow users to basically now mount any kind of secret or config map or whatever they want. And we should make sure that they can use this together with the custom authentication and authorization and, for example, config providers and so on to kind of configure this from the secret and not having some OAuth secret access key or whatever in a plain text. But I guess that would be the main thing which we would need to change here, as we might need to add some new options to the OAuth library for this to, for example, allow to use config providers to read certificates from mounted secrets instead of having the operator do it, and so on. In the comments, it seemed that this is in general something people are positive about. I think this should still go through proposal to kind of clarify the details. Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's needs proposals already there, so needs triage can be removed. So that's the OAuth stuff. And next one is the connect topic names. So I don't know who remembers this. We triaged it already, actually. So right now in Connect, when the different names for the internal Connect topics and in a way for Mirror Maker 2 as well, when they are not specified, the operator uses the default values, and the default values are static. So that leads to common problems when the user doesn't specify them and then has multiple different Connect or Mirror Maker resources which just use the same defaults. And that kind of actually gets all the Connect or all the Mirror Maker 2 clusters kind of merged into a single virtual cluster. Also, in theory, they should be separate clusters, and it typically breaks them. So the idea here was to try to make these fields required and force the users to always configure them and remove the defaults in the operator. So that way, kind of, it will have more visibility for the users, and it will probably make it more clear that if they are set to the same value in multiple resources, then maybe there's something wrong with that configuration. So I didn't actually prototype this, but I was thinking about how we can do it. I assume we can, in the Kafka Connect resource, I think this is feasible because we know exactly where this configuration needs to be, and we can just use the cell validation to basically make sure that these values are present there. Where it gets a bit more complicated is in the Mirror Maker 2, because basically there you have the list of the clusters, and then you have a separate definition that one of these clusters is the Connect cluster, which kind of is used for the underlying Connect as the I don't know how you call it, as the main cluster it connects to. And I'm not entirely sure we can do with some reasonable way. And then basically the configuration for the topics and for the group ID is inside the list of the cluster configurations in one of the config fields. And I'm not sure if we can really use the cell validations for something this complicated, what kind of has to take the list of the cluster specifications, then reach up to a completely different part of the CRD to see who is the connect cluster, and then get back to the cluster list and say, oh, hey, this is the connect cluster. This needs to have these resources specified. So I guess the question which I was wondering about is if we can do this only for connect and not for mirror maker, do we still want to do it for connect?
So I think we should do it for Connect. I was just double checking, and the settings are mandatory at the Kafka level. So yeah, to me, it, like you say, it's an area that is really easy to overlook and get yourself in quite a mess. And so I 100% think we should make them mandatory and Connect. For Mirror Maker 2, I've actually been looking at the Mirror Maker 2 CR recently because of the documentation efforts that Paul's been doing around that. And I wonder if we just need a separate issue to determine what we want them to do with Mirror Maker 2 for the V1 API, because, like you say, it's a little bit confusing anyway with the spec Connect name specifying which one's for Connect, but actually today we're now enforcing that the spec.connect name has to be the target. So when you specify your connectors, you specify your source cluster and your target cluster, and if the target cluster doesn't match the connect name, then it fails, which is fine for source and whatever the other one's called. The one in the middle, checkpoint. But for Heartbeat, that's then a bit confusing. And the way you set up a Mirror Maker 2 CR for a Heartbeat connector is a bit weird. So I wonder if we just need a kind of,
I think nobody used the Heartbeat connector.
well, yeah. I wonder if we need a step back for the Mirror Maker 2 CR and just have a quick rundown and just see if we think it makes sense in the shape that it is, or if there are any like other changes you want to make, and take this into account as well. And just is there a better way to map out the Mirror Maker 2 custom resource that makes it clearer what's going on? And for example, putting the topic names in a required way that kind of makes sense. Like, should we do it a bit different? So that would be my thought, is do we just say, yes, we're going to do it for Connect, but maybe we just have a separate issue to work out what we're doing for Mirror Maker 2, again, trying to make the topic names mandatory, but also considering are there other things we want to change? Because at this point, to me, the Connect, like, well, either what's the point of specifying the Connect name, or what's the point of specifying the target if they have to be set to the same thing?
I think originally the idea, and I don't know, I guess Mikhail would need to confirm this. Originally, the idea was that in the future, the limitation that the connect cluster has to be the target cluster will not be there.
But I don't think that is a limitation. Like,
It is
isn't
a
that just
limitation
why?
because when the mirroring connector, I'm not the expert, so like, you know who to ask if you want to have the 100% correct answer, I guess. But my understanding is that the connectors, you have either source connectors or sink connectors.
Yeah.
And right now we have source connectors. So you are reading from the source cluster and publishing to the target cluster. And that's why the connect cluster has to be the target cluster, because that's how the message flow is.
But when you're configuring Mirror Maker connectors, you configure the connect cluster separately to how you configure source and target. So it's Strimzi, which is conflating the connect cluster and the target cluster together. I'm pretty sure if you deploy Mirror Maker yourself and connect and the connectors yourself, you can set up so that so you've got source and target Kafka. I'm pretty sure you can configure it so that you have the topics being stored in the source cluster and still the mirroring is source to target. I'm pretty sure that is a valid configuration.
No, I don't think that works.
It does.
I don't think so. That's why you also always need a pair of Mirror Maker 2 cluster if you want to have bidirectional mirroring, because one does this direction, other does this direction.
I mean,
so as I said, so my understanding is that there was, at least in the beginning, plan to make this possible, but that was never implemented so far. You should also not confuse it with when you are running it with this Mirror Maker 2 command, which I don't think is necessarily running it in the same way as when you run it as a connectors. So there you can do this, but that's deploying it in a completely different way.
Yeah, we're deploying it as a connect cluster and running the connectors on top, right? Yeah, which is the way that we should be doing it. Okay, I feel like I think we need a separate issue to discuss.
So will you open one?
Yeah, I'll open one.
That said, I don't think there's really much time for that.
No.
So I think you should start thinking about it right now.
Yes, I agree.
Right after this call, or I mean, yeah, you go to pharmacy or whatever, but
yeah,
like we should not delay this.
No. Yeah, we need
again
to
and again and again.
Decided ASAP. Yeah.
Okay, so and by the way, I didn't kind of finish this, but in theory, we can also kind of use the V1 version. So as part of the V1 migration, there will be the conversion of converting all the resources to the V1. We can use this opportunity to tell the users to set these things in the Mirror Maker 2, even if they are not validated. And we can just somehow remove the validation maybe in the operator together with it. So that will be kind of a bit hacky option, but it might be option as well that we kind of don't validate it in the custom resource, but we at least kind of enforce it through the operator, which is not as nice, but it helps us to avoid of this mess with the same topic being used by multiple clusters. So like this, does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for the issues we had.
If you do a refresh, you should have the Kafka topic replication factor one. I did tag Fede, but obviously it was like 30 minutes ago, so whether he responded, I don't know.
Yeah, it's.
So I don't know whether we want to discuss this now or just wait for some more. But I did create it.
Yeah, I mean we can discuss it.
Yeah, I mean my feeling is.
What about the silent people? What they think about it?
Well, I feel like I could be argued around either way on this one because I understand why it's nice to have it the same as the Kubernetes.
Actually, I will try to decide it. We should not do this. And
because
long story short, and that's more part for the V1 proposal, but do not tell you we should not do it and you should wait another week for the proposal. There's the issue, basically one thing we learned last time the hard way is that the topic and the user operators are a problem because they run decoupled from the cluster operator. So when you do the upgrade of the operator with the upgraded CRDs, what happens is you upgrade the CRDs and you upgrade the cluster operator, but the topic and user operator will keep running the old versions and using the old APIs. And that's what led us last time to the problem that we found out, luckily last minute, we found out that this actually leads to the topics and users being deleted. And that's why if you look at the custom resources we have them today, all of them have only the V1 Beta 2 version, but the topic and user operators have the V1 Alpha and V1 Beta 1 versions as well, purely for this reason, because we basically were not able to remove them. So what I'm proposing now is, what I'm gonna propose now is that the way we should do it is we should actually switch the topic and user operators to use the V1 API right away from the beginning. But that means that users need to convert these resources right from the beginning. So if we, let's say, in 049 introduce the V1 API, then they can continue to use the old structures of the Kafka, Kafka Connect, and so on APIs. But for the topics and users, they should use the new APIs. Or they should make sure that their resources are valid under the new APIs. And the reason why I think this is fine is that actually today the user and topic operators have the Kafka user and Kafka topic CRDs have a minimal number of change. The only change there is basically that we have this long deprecated field operation in the user, in the Kafka user resource, and that's it. So I argue that from the user perspective, in the proposal I'm writing, I argue that from the user perspective, it's completely fine to tell the users, now make sure you don't use this deprecated operation field and start using the V1 API in the user and topic operator right away. And that will make it easier for us to then actually remove all the APIs for the users and topics when we are removing it from the other APIs as well. And obviously, if we now decide to change the replicas to the replication factor, that means that the users who will be upgrading to the first version, to the 049 or 0450 or whatever, they would need to convert or update all their Kafka topic resources. And then they will be forced to again update all of the resources later on, probably. Whereas this way, kind of, with the no changes to Kafka topic and just one deprecation for Kafka user, this would be pretty smooth. But if they have to change all their Kafka topic resources, that would be pretty hard. And the alternative would be to kind of have the switch of the user and topic operator somewhere in the middle. But that would kind of significantly extend the period during which we have to do the migration. It would also mean that there will be more points in time through which every user has to upgrade. That obviously has negative impact on any downstream vendor which has some LTS versions, because suddenly you will need to do 4 LTS versions through the migration and not just 3, and stuff like that. So for me, that will be the reason why this is not a good idea.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and especially given that we know that Kafka topic CR is one they're likely to have lots of. So that makes sense to me.
Okay, can be rejected.
Ronaldo's got his hand up.
Yeah, just give like my 5 cents of contribution here. Today I have like a ton of topics in production running with Strimzi. I agree that replica is a bit odd for Kafka topic, because for me it's more like a resource in Kubernetes, like pod deployments and jobs and other things. When you say replicas for Kappa topic is odd for me, but that's fine. It works today. But changing to another name will, like, I need to migrate everything in production to this new name. So yeah, that's a big bang. I think we need to think how to do that without a big bang change, in my opinion, my honest opinion.
Yeah, I think, yeah, maybe if from the beginning we'd renamed it, then that would be good. But yeah, given where we are, I think keeping it as is fine. So let's.
Yeah, like it's a timing issue for me. If we would have done that 2 years ago, then yeah, it would be much easier to handle because much less users would be using it, like the operation field in the Kafka user.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, it is a big migration for users for something small.
Yeah. So can we reject it?
Yeah, we can just, it's just adding to my GitHub stats, opening issues.
Well, I think the CNCF dev stats, they have stats even for closing issues and so on, maybe.
Yeah, well, you get the stat for closing it though, right?
I really like this proposal, but the impact is bigger, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the trade-off always between having something that works in an ideal way versus the impact on existing users.
Yeah, I agree.
But I guess it's a good turnover for the project as well. Coming up with an issue at 3 p.m. and 5 minutes and closing it at 3 p.m. and 55 minutes. So I guess we run out of time and we also run out of the issues. So Kate, you will still open the Mirror Maker too and think about it?
Yes. Yeah, I'll have a good think about that and see if I can come up with a proposal of exactly which fields we should have in the Mirror Maker 2 and how it should work. It maybe we could stick with roughly what we've got, but at least taking into account the Connect name and how we would incorporate having required topic names.
Yeah, and I have to update my prototype and revert all the Kafka spec changes I have there. And I hope I will be able to open the proposal for the CRD V1 at least in some draft form later this week so that everyone can have a look at it. But yeah, we also need to work on the OAuth proposal to deprecate that as well. So thanks everyone for joining. And just a reminder, we have another special triage call, this time for the regular issues on Thursday, same time as today.
Cool, thanks. Thanks for setting
Thanks.
us up.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.